chat live stream where we talk about photography and catch up with everyone, how the community's doing. I'm doing well. I hope you guys are doing well. And I like to let the audience drive the conversation, so I leave it as an open Q&A today. If you have anything you want to talk about it specifically, or if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And I'll just start off with just a few things I did this week. Um, Photographically speaking, um, I just been doing mostly some macro stuff and also some infrared. And I went out a couple of times to with the photo club, uh, like Meadowlark Gardens, and then I also went to uh, a refuge, a wildlife refuge, not too far from me. I haven't been there in about 5 years, um, and going back there again today kind of reminded me why I didn't go there. It's really not a lot going on. Although I've seen some beautiful pictures of like osprey and some other wildlife there. Every time I've gone there, it's nothing. Uh, so there's that. But it's good to go back to locations that maybe you haven't been to in a long time and see what's changed. And unfortunately, this place really hasn't changed that much for me. And maybe I'm going on an off day. It wasn't a perfect time of day, but you can kind of get a sense of you know what kind of activities going on because when I was walking around, I didn't hear any birds hardly. Every now and then I'd hear one chirping, but there's other locations I go to in my area where, there's just constant bird chirping and all different kinds of birds. So yeah, I don't know why some locations that look ideal. I mean, the place looked ideal for all kinds of wildlife. I just didn't see any. Same thing that was like about 5 years ago. But maybe I'll go back one more time because it's not that far away and try again. But yeah, there was just nothing. And then I got drenched. It started pouring rain and I was a mile out on the trail. So I had to walk back in pouring rain. Luckily, all my OM system gear that I brought, was weather sealed. So I didn't have to worry about my camera. And of course, the my messenger bag is pretty well sealed. So everything stayed nice and dry more or less. Oh, but that was yesterday. Then before that, I went to Metalark and I tried some infrared photography, which is like the thumbnail on this particular live stream. And uh, still practicing. This time I tried like a 580 nanometer filter, which is basically red. And uh, it's my post processing needs some work. So those are the areas that I'm trying to get into is some infrared and some macro. On the macro side, I am having pretty good luck. Doing really well with just a very basic diffuser setup and a 60 millimeter macro lens. Yeah. I know a lot of you, yeah, this thing, a lot of you have bought this off my recommendation. And, it's just a little pop up that just goes around the front of your lens and your flash is back here. And this has been working great. So once I kind of get my workflow down, I will maybe do a video on this and some samples of my different settings. But it just goes to show, and I think Emily Taupin, I haven't watched yet. Emily Taupin just did a video about why Micro Four Thirds is so great for uh, for macro, and I think most of us already know that. And and it's great to see so many Micro Four Third photographers when I go out in the field. I ran into, and there wasn't that many people there, but I ran into two more OM System Olympus shooters while I was in the field at the National Wildlife Park. And then I also, when I was in Meadowlark Gardens, I ran into a few more. So it's out there, which kind of leads to the recent chatter about how OM Systems, uh, other than Pentax, right, Rico, was at the bottom of the list in terms of gross number of units shipped to worldwide. They were like something like 130,000. And when you think about and that was for 2024. When you think about what they had in 2024, they really only had three cameras, right? Uh, OM1 Mark II, OM5, and a TG7, and that's it. That's really all you can order. Uh, Among plus the various lenses they release. But when you kind of look at it that way, I guess a per camera sales was pretty good. I think the TG7 being a pretty good chunk of that, and that's a great camera. So yeah, I think we're doing okay. I mean, I said last week that even if they only sold one camera and it was to me, I'd still be a very happy camper. But there's always concerns of what's the long-term viability of a company that's at or near the bottom. And I get that, and I'm not too worried about it personally, but I understand as a maybe a professional working photographer, when you invest into a system and you need support in terms of doing repairs or uh, variety of support services that professionals look forward to. Maybe that could be some concern, but as an enthusiast and uh, just casual photographer time to time, meaning casual professional work, uh, I'm not worried about it at all, and I'm going to continue to invest in OM systems because I think they make the best cameras, and are constantly showing their support to their uh, buyers via YouTube channels. They have some great live streams and videos on their channel, how-tos and capabilities, and the support from the OM system ambassadors themselves with their own independent YouTube channels. And then enthusiasts like myself that continue to support the system. And Robin Wong is another good example. So I I don't I don't let those kind of numbers sway my camera buying decision for me. I buy the camera that I think is the best for what I do, and I invest in that system. So I encourage everyone not to worry too much about that because like I said, there's so much chatter, a lot of it negative about the sales at home systems. Now, it'll be curious to see in 2025 what happens. Uh, with the release of the OM3 and the OM5 Mark II on top of the one from last year. So we'll see, but they still have a very thin, you know, line of cameras, right? There's still going to be basically three: OM1 Mark II, well, four now: OM3, OM5 Mark II, and TG7. So now we have four cameras, and I would suspect the number should go up a little, and then the per camera might be down a little bit. And I think, I've said this many times in the past. I think a good way to uh, sort of build on that is to introduce an OM20. Forget about the OM10. It's too close to an OM5. I would introduce like an OM20 and be at a sub $500 price point so that you can get people into the Micro Four Thirds systems, introduce them to the computational photography and the more specifically the image quality that you get from a smaller sensor, which is uh, really, for all intents and purposes, on par with any other camera out there. I get it. There's dynamic range issues where full frame is going to be better than APS-C, and APS-C could be better than Micro Four Thirds. But we're really, honestly, I think we're splitting hairs. Uh, if you get a good exposure on your image, you really don't need to push and pull highlights and shadows so much. You just do a little bit of push and pull here and there, and you know you get the exposure or the image that you want. Uh, because we have what 12 stops or whatever it is of dynamic range in our cameras, generally speaking, maybe up to 14 or 15 with the larger sensor format cameras, and that can certainly be an advantage in certain situations. But for the most part, uh, even a compact camera like a TG7 can give you excellent image quality and enough dynamic range to capture, just beautiful images. So I just want to kind of temper the conversation about all of the strengths and weaknesses of the different sensor formats. It When it comes to photography, the gear is not that important. What's important is, do you want to use the camera and then look at does the camera inspire you to go out? Uh, because it's a smaller, compact, more lightweight system. And also, you think about what you're taking pictures of, the photography, the creative part of it, your composition, your storytelling, the elements in the photo that you want to share. All these things are really why I do photography. Is I enjoy the challenge of trying to find an interesting composition, which is normally otherwise a relatively mundane type scene. So that's why I tried from going in infrared and looking at and getting in the macro. It's These are two areas that in my last 12 years I've been doing photography, I never really expanded on. And now I'm going into that. I'm really enjoying it. For others, it might be, astrophotography or, um, landscape photography or whatever areas that maybe you haven't been into and you want to get into. And that's the kind of photography or things I like to talk about when we talk about photography, uh, and not so much about the gear. Now, I'm not saying I don't love gear. I love gear. I love getting into specs, and we can get into the fine print about all of the things that go with that. But I don't know where most people are at when it comes to photography, right? I think it's 50-50, right? Half of us enjoy the craft and don't care what camera we use. We'll just take any camera and go out there. And half of us really enjoy the technology and the capabilities that our cameras can do and pushing them to their limits. And that's why the latest and greatest gear, whenever there's a little bit of improvement here and there or some new feature, we can get really excited and go out and try those things. And that in of itself is perfectly fine, right? So, I don't want to put any shade on either side of the conversation. They're both different ways that we can enjoy, this particular craft that we do. So anyhow, let me check into the chat section. That's my little rant rumble kind of about the recent numbers. There's so much chatter. I haven't had a chance to watch uh Jimmy's live stream, but I'll try and catch that maybe tomorrow. But I did drop in on Robin's live stream where he talked about it. Um, let's see. So, oh, Greg, you bought PhotoLab 9 with my link and code. Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's another big thing is PhotoLab 9 came out from DxO, and they really they added this amazing AI uh, masking, which, oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. With one caveat, um, I'm having random crashes on my computer uh, using the subject selection. Like if you want to say select people or select animals, it crashes more often than using the other AI masking tools. If I use the other AI masking tools, I don't get any problems. But I did notice, and depending what NVIDIA driver I use, an NVIDIA graphics card I use, uh, I'll get more crashes than others. So the latest NVIDIA driver, 580 point something, definitely crashes immediately with the subject detect. So so I don't know what happened with the latest driver from NVIDIA, if it's broken on their end or broken on the DxO side. It's probably a little of both, but that's crashing a lot. So I backed off to driver 577, and that was better. And then currently I'm experimenting with the one before that. I think it's 567, which was released in June. And that one is pretty solid. I did get one crash, and but other than that, the dozen images that I edited using the AI subject select seem to be fine. Seem to be working fine so far. But that was, I've only been doing it a day with this driver. But so far, if you're having problems with PhotoLab subject detect and you're using a Windows 11 PC with the NVIDIA graphics drivers, try downloading 567 point something, whatever was released in June, and install that driver and see if that mitigates some of the issues that you might be having, particularly with the AI subject detect. Uh, the other solution, and it's the other solution which eliminates all the problems, is to disable GPU acceleration in the performance settings in DxO and do CPU only. And I couldn't get the computer to crash at all, no matter what I did at that point. So it's definitely something to do with the NVIDIA. Now, I've heard people say their Radeon graphics card, uh, they're not having any issues at all, but it's something to do with NVIDIA. And I have a GTX or RTX 480 laptop. But yeah, try backing it off a little, see if that helps. If you're on a Mac, people are saying they're having no problems. People keep telling me to buy a Mac. I'm not going to do it. Okay. But, uh, and not because there's anything wrong with Apple products. They make great products. I just have a personal problem with them. But I got to get over one of these days. I will. I got to get over my personal issue with them. Okay. And Body 66, good to see you. Serge, good to see you. Oh, wow, your first kingfisher. That's awesome. That is awesome. Kingfishers are sort of my nemesis, right? I'm still trying to get that picture of the kingfisher where its beak just hits into the water, and you get a little splash of the water right where the beak drops in. So that's the shot I'm going to try and get. And sorry, let's see. Friend wants to buy a Pen F for 900. I'm steering him towards Fuji. How bad is autofocus on the Pen F? He's convinced the Pen F JPEGs are to die for. Well, point to point, like just single autofocus, it's as good as any camera out there, really. uh, where the Pen F struggles, and this is true for any contrast detect system, but the Pen F in particular, is the continuous autofocus is a little rough. Uh, so if the subject is moving, you know, through focal planes, like walking toward you, walking away, if it's a person, uh, yeah, it's very, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. Uh, and even focusing on things using continuous autofocus that on subjects that are not moving. Let's say you're taking a picture of some artwork or a statue. It's best just to use SAF or single autofocus. And in that scenario, the PenF does really well, as any camera does really. It's in the continuous autofocus, particularly with telephoto lenses, where it's kind of the weakest of all the OM System Olympus cameras. Uh, of everything that was available at that time. Now the Fuji, um, people are constantly complaining about the autofocus on Fuji, but I found that to be true really only with the video side. If you're talking about stills, the autofocus seems fine to me. So, and the Fuji's, depending what model it is, The more modern ones have subject detect, which works fairly well. It's not perfect. In fact, the subject detect in the Fujis, I don't think is as good as the one in the newer OM system cameras, but it works. And ultimately, the autofocus will be better in the Fuji for still photographer than the Pen F. Pen F is how many years old now, you know? I'm not sure why that even among its peers at the time, the autofocus and continuous autofocus wasn't that great. But yeah, point to point, they'll be perfectly fine. And it was the camera I used until I got the OM3, the most by far for all of my photography. And I never really struggled with autofocus when I was using single point, or single autofocus, SAF. So I wouldn't worry about it. If you prefers the color science straight out of camera from the Pen F over the Fujifilm, just get the Pen F. If you can find one in good condition with a lower shutter count, and that camera has been rock solid for me uh, in terms of reliability, and everything still works on that camera 100%. All the buttons, the dials, there's no flakiness. Um, and I'm saying that in comparison to, say, my EM10 Mark II, which I beat to death. Okay, it was my very first Micro Four Thirds camera. It's dead now. It just it just doesn't work, and it doesn't have as many clicks on the shutter as my Pen F. Um, so the Fujifilm simulations are fine if you like those, but if you like I said, if you likes the color science and the Pen F better, just get the Pen F. Don't worry about the Fuji. Um, okay, and then Gord says, any thoughts on the Sigma 17 to 41.8 art? Not really. I, I guess it's replacing their older 1835 f1.8, and I used to have that lens, and it was very sharp, but it was kind of bulky and heavy. This newer one is a little smaller and lighter, maybe enough that it's not a barrier. But one of the reasons I sold my 18 to 35 was it's just bulky and heavy, and the autofocus wasn't that accurate. I would get confirmation in camera, but then when I went back, it was out of focus. So ultimately, I just couldn't rely on the lens. Uh, the new Sigma lenses that I've been using, and I have a few, they've been fine. So I'm sure the 17 to 40 has great autofocus now. And it's probably a very, very good lens for any APS-C camera. So, and it's a good range, right? What's that effectively? Like a 26 to, uh, or yeah, roughly a 26 to 50 or 60, a 26 to, sorry, 26 millimeter to 60 in full frame terms with a constant f1.8. Seems fine. Personally, I would probably go with, I think they have a 16 to 50 2.8, which is smaller and lighter than this. That's the way I would go personally if I was on an APS-C system, because that's even a wider range, right? That's a 24 to 75. That's a much more usable range for a walk-around lens. And unless I needed specifically a wide open aperture of f1.8, which commonly you need in video work, because a lot of times you're indoors, right, doing video, and you need as much light as you can. But for photography, you can go with a 2.8, and if the light gets low, just add a flash, right? Uh, so again, it depends on your use case, but yeah, I think the 16 to 50 2.8 would be a better choice for me for its more compact size and wider zoom range. The 17 to 40 is just a little bit too big and too specialized. You really need a one. If you really need a 1.8, you need it. But for me, I wouldn't need it. Oh, and Jeff says, "Congrats on getting 50K." Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, 50,000 subscribers. Boy, that took a while, didn't it? When I started a channel, I said, "Oh, 50,000, no problem." My God, 12 years later, or how long have I been on YouTube? 11 years. Uh, yeah, took a long time. And really, I don't try to push for subscribers. Uh, I did early on. I was like, like, subscribe. I said that like in every video. I do it sometimes too out of habit, but really, I think for me, YouTube is about trying to create, you know, s you know, for me, I try to create pragmatic, useful content, and then the occasional gear review uh, that I think might be useful. So, and that's more important than say gaining subscribers, because YouTube ultimately is going to show videos from your channel to non-subscribers more often than not. Uh, so I don't know. I'm happy to be at 50,000. It's a great number. It looks good, when you visit a channel to see how many subscribers they got. But ultimately, what's important to me is that I try to help as many people as I can uh, with the viewership that I get. And I see David Black is here. Good morning. And Lasse is here. Gord from Canada. And then Marco says, everyone harping on those numbers failed to mention that production was stopped on a couple of bodies and lenses in that time frame due to OM transition, including the M10. Okay. I didn't know they were still transitioning or stop production in 2024. And I guess there was a loss too, right? Like minus 1.2 billion yen or something, which it's hard to uh, quantify that number in the sense that you don't know how much they spent investing in R&D, research and development, and also in marketing and advertising. So it's hard to say. Uh, Maybe they put a big investment into those things that they plan for those to pay off in dividends later. Like I'm sure a lot of that money was an R&D into the OM3 that came out, which that this camera. Oh my God, I love this camera. This OM3. I got a new base plate for it, which should be coming in next week. So I'll show you guys that. I love this half leather case, but I don't like the that I have to attach a separate Arca Swiss plate. So I think I'm going to go with just a metal base that has Arca Swiss plate built in, and that'll be a lot more practical. Although this cosmetically, I think it's much nicer. But I'm finding issues where I have to take the plate off to do some things and put it back on to do other things, and it's kind of a pain. Whereas if it was just kind of built in, I wouldn't have to worry about taking it on and off for different things. So, for example, like I like to use um, tabletop tripods or mini tripods or grips with the camera sometimes when I'm doing macro work, and I have to take the plate off to use these smaller stands and tripods. For example, like this one I have on my OM1. I like this because when I'm doing macro work, I can just kind of hold the camera and the diffuser. It's just a lot easier when I'm doing handheld macro work. And if I want to set it down on the ground, I can set it on the ground for, ground level type macro of flowers and mushrooms, whatever. Uh, and the OM1 I have, uh, which actually, since I just showed Marco got me this as a gift, which I really appreciate. But I can screw the grip directly into the base plate here. But if I take this handle off, I still have the Arca Swiss plate here, and I can just put this back on my tripod. So this is a lot more functional, this type of plate, than say this half leather case, which has a base plate, but it doesn't have the Arca Swiss built into it. So This has been serving its purpose to protect the bottom of the camera and reinforce the tripod screw mount, but it's just really awkward the way I do my photography. Like I said, I'm getting into macro and infrared. So for macro, I need sometimes the tabletop or a small tripod, and for infrared, a lot of times I need a full-size tripod with the Arca Swiss. So this has been really awkward. So I ordered a new plate from Leo Photo, which has the Arca Swiss plate and also a small, a relatively small grip to it, because you don't really need much grip on this camera. Um, or I don't need much grip on it. What that little bump there is more than enough to be able to hold the camera securely. And the EM10 is consistently the best seller in Japan. Is it really? I didn't know. It doesn't surprise me because it's the entry level, it's the lowest price point camera. That's why I was thinking an OM20 would make a lot of sense. How good is the TG7 underwater? I've seen a lot of videos of people taking this down. Supposedly it'll do 30 meters or 50 to 100 feet underwater, I think. Double check that. But you see a lot of people, snorkelers and shallow water, basically scuba diving, and it works great. Particularly with the TG6 and 7, they updated the underwater. They updated something that was very specific to underwater photography. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, so that it's even better. So there's some minor updates to this TG6 and 7 for underwater photography that's not on my TG, because I have a TG5. The most I've ever done with my TG5 is I'll put the camera in the water, maybe a centimeter or so, when I was taking a picture of, say, uh, water lily or feathers from, geese and things that are in the water. It's kind of cool. But I haven't personally done anything underwater with it. But I've seen a lot of videos. So uh, based on that, and there's lots of blog posts about the underwater capabilities of the TG7. So if you're thinking about it for snorkeling and more shallow water type, uh, scuba diving, I don't see any issues with it. I've not seen any or heard of any issues with it. And same here. Hey, Roberto, how are you? Same here, Rob. PL9 started crashing even when I selected Sky. Yeah, so again, Roberto, try going back to, I'm not sure what computer you have, but try going back to a previous driver version and see if that mitigates it somewhat. So far, I'm doing okay. And too many shots in continuous autofocus on my Fuji kit. Too many lost shots. Okay. I've not had that problem, but I don't use my Fuji that much. I'm going to use it a lot in about a week or two because I have to review a flash for it, and then I'll get a better feel. Yeah. Going to church. Okay. God bless. Uh, and thanks for dropping in. I appreciate it. And Robert's here. Good morning, Robert. Good to see you. Didn't see you this weekend at any of the events, but Robert is local to me. And Eric is here. Good morning. Oh, you're in Virginia Beach. Nice. It's a little cloudy today, though. At least here. I don't know how it is in Virginia Beach, but I imagine it's cloudy too. And Eric says, I really missed a lens type camera bot today. I really missed a lens type camera today. Took a sunrise photo over the Atlantic, but there was dolphins out there. The Leica is a 28 millimeter. You may see dots of oh, you mean an interchangeable lens type camera? Yeah, yeah. When you take out a fixed lens camera, particularly a fixed focal length camera, your photography, you have to be very intentional about what you're going to be shooting that day, right? Uh, I wish the M10 would have worked out for me, but the regular OM5 is great. Yes. Yeah, the OM5 is a much better camera. And hello, fellow Pentaxian. Hey, how are you, Xmeta? Yes, I am a Pentaxian. I don't think I qualify to be a Pentaxian, but I do really like my Pentax cameras, uh, particularly my monochrome. And the new K3 color one that I got is really nice too. It's shooting with a DSLR where you have an optical EVF is a very, very different experience. And it's frustrating at some times, but other times it's very refreshing, right? And using the camera and talking about gear, Pentax is one of the most well thought out photographer orientated cameras I've ever used. I mean, it's right there with OM systems, and yet they're very different because OM systems is all mirrorless. So the workflow and the features are different, but they're still very thoughtful. But the Pentax as for DSLR, wow, it's amazing. And I've had every other DSLR, well, not every other, but I've had a few others, right? My Nikon DSLRs, I've used Canon DSLRs, and uh, yeah, those are the main ones. Mainly Nikon, and I like the Pentax so much more than my Nikon DSLR. Uh, that said, I do miss my D750 a little, and the D780 is pretty nice too. But I think I'd still rather have. I don't know. I may get a D780 later. I don't know. Somebody brought one this weekend to one of the meetups, and I was like, wow, I kind of miss my D750, and the D780 is pretty nice because they put touchscreen in, and that worked really well. And I hate touchscreens, but sometimes they're really handy too. So, uh, but anyhow, yeah, Pentax, and I haven't had a chance to fix my old K10, unfortunately. I've been so busy. Um, And Darko says, my Rainax is finally here, and I did a few test shots. Really cool. Seems to be best optimized for my 55. Yes. Using it on that particular focal range and being a zoom lens makes it so easy to uh, get that initial focus by zooming in and out, and then, using the autofocus, your shutter button to autofocus the rest of the way. Um, it's very similar to using the 40 to 150 on our Micro Four Thirds. Uh, It's just very easy to use on a zoom lens. I've been using my Raynox, or not my Raynox, but a diopter similar to Raynox on my 60 macro lens mostly. But when I use it on my 40 to 150, it's really easy. You don't get the same magnification, of course, but uh, yeah, using diopters and extension tubes is ideal for zoom lenses. And Mark says, just purchase the M1 original and your thoughts, please. Okay, so I guess, and good morning, Manuel, is it's always in relation to what, right? So, what are my thoughts on the M1? I think it's a great camera. I have a silver edition. Let's see this one. So, the original EM1 is so compact relative to, say, the EM1 Mark II and 3, and now the OM1. This is substantially smaller in overall size. Now, if you look at the dimensions, yeah, it's a millimeter here and a millimeter there, but in hand, it feels a lot smaller. And they had a ton of firmware updates on this, so make sure you're up to firmware 4 point something, whatever that is. Make sure you're up to the latest firmware so you can take advantage of all the features that they added and support for lenses. But what I like about this, it has a ton of buttons and dials and switches. on the back, on the top again, or dial switches and buttons, and then also on the front. Excuse me. So it's a very tactile camera. And then it has the more, for photography, a lot of people prefer just the regular tilt screen, versus, the fully articulating. And in this respect, for a camera of this age, you can still get fantastic results. I haven't shot with it in a while, but um, let me see. If if you go to my Flickr page, I have an album of the photos that I took using the EM1 Mark One. So I did some fisheye stuff, some birding stuff, and so if you punch in, and I think this is the 75 to 300, you can get terrific results with the EM1. Uh, Again, 75 to 300 lens, so very compact kit, very capable, amazing results with it. And let me go here. Black and white is amazing on this camera. All of these have been processed to some extent, so take that into account when you're looking at these. But the detail, the tonality, everything about this camera and the sensor is really amazing. Is this the M1? Yeah, this is the M1 with the 300 millimeter f4, which is Olympus's basically sharpest lens, in my opinion. Uh, just amazing detail, even with a 16 megapixel sensor. So, and this is with the fisheye. This is the dramatic tone art filter. So it has all of the art filters you could want. Another straight out of camera dramatic tone art filter with the 8 millimeter fisheye lens. I just So for photos, no issues with this camera at all. Uh, and again, for single point autofocus, continuous autofocus is still very good. It's certainly better than the Pen F. But where it's a little bit lacking, or a little bit slow compared to, say, a more modern digital camera, is the continuous autofocus and tracking. It cannot track at all unless the subject's moving like a snail. Like at a snail's pace, yeah, it might track that. But if it's moving at all at any normal speed, the tracking is terrible. So again, with this camera, I confidently used continuous autofocus for like those bird on a stick type photos, but I would use single point autofocus, but continuous autofocus was fine. And uh, just that overall the camera feels a little bit sluggish, but I'm used to my OM1 and OM3 now. So in relation to much newer camera, it's a little bit sluggish. But I think you can get great pictures from it. And it's still a very capable camera with a lot of computational features like focus stacking, live comp. I don't recall if this has high res shot mode or not. I don't recall. HDR, multiple exposure. I don't see high res shot mode. So yeah, that's not something this has. I think that was introduced in the EM5 Mark II, maybe. But yeah, fabulous camera. Great screen. I don't remember the EVF. The EVF, yep, very nice. Looks good. So enjoy this camera. I know I think these are going for like 200 or around 200 bucks on the used market for a black one, maybe a little more for the silver one. And, it's weather sealed. I wouldn't test that too much now on a camera that's this old, right? Because the rubber seals and everything, they can start to dry out. May not be as sealed as it used to, especially if it has a little higher shutter count. But yeah, uh, I I think it's a fabulous camera, and you're going to enjoy it a lot. The grip is very comfortable. So those are my thoughts. I think this is a great camera, especially because these have been discounted so much on the used market. I don't know what they're selling for. Let's look. Wow, the price has gone up. I'm just looking at like this one. This one's broken. LCD's not displaying. Here's one in mint condition, 400. Wow. Wow, prices have gone up since I last looked at this. Let's do E-M1 silver. Holy crap. I only paid 250 bucks for mine. There's a bunch here for way more. $1,000? Oh, well, it includes a grip, but still. Yeah, good luck. Good luck, Nico. Uh, 400's a little bit of a stretch for this. At $400, I'd probably move up to an EM5 Mark II. Uh, although I think you lose phase detect. Maybe an EM5 Mark III in the $400-500 range. Gosh. But anyhow, hopefully you got a good deal on it. uh, for the price where we use D850 is coming within reach. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I want that big of a camera. I was looking at like a D810 even. I wanted that camera so bad back when I shot Nikon. The D810 is much more affordable, but yeah, I don't know. It's just too big of a camera. And Wayne is here. Good morning, Wayne. And Roberto says, I mastered Luminar Neo, but still like to use PL9 for noise reduction and cool film presets. Yes. I've never gotten around my head around Luminar and the workflow with that. Uh, Next minute says, what fast but affordable lens would you select to fit between a 9 1.7 and a 25 1.7? I also have the 12 to 42.8, but recently shooting some concert is still too dark. Maybe a Panasonic 15. Yeah, I like the 15 1.7 a lot. And if I could start over again, I would get the 15 over the 17 millimeter that I got from Olympus because I have the Olympus 17 1.8. So I think that would be an excellent choice, the 15 1.7. Trying to think if there's anything else. Nothing else comes to mind because there's the 15 and the 17. There's if you don't mind the size, Sigma makes the 16 millimeter 1.4, which gets you even more light. It's just kind of a chunky lens on them, depending what camera you're going to use it on. If you're on it like an EM1 or OM1, the 16 1.4 is fine, but it's a little chunky on just about any other camera. So I would go either way. The 16 1.4 if you want maximum light and don't mind the size, or the 15 1.7, which is probably going to be a more versatile lens for you overall. Uh, because it's a smaller lens, you'll be willing to take it with you and pack it in your bag more often than the 16. So look at the Sigma 16 1.4. I think optically, probably the Panasonic is a little better, but I think I have about 40,000 on mine, and it still works great. And Darko says, tried the Luminar, not for me either. Yeah, the workflow in Luminar is very different. Generally, you start with a preset and then tweak from there. Um, and that's how it's used best, I think, is using their presets and other sort of canned automated type stuff. And it's a little bit more intuitive for some people. Uh, well, I would say even for a lot of people because it's a popular photo editing software. But I still have trouble wrapping my brain around it. Who makes a 21.4? I don't know what lens that is. I know there's a 21.7, if that's what you meant, the pancake lens, but that's a little bit slow to autofocus. I don't know if that would be fast enough in low light. And by fast, I mean autofocus speed. I heard it's very slow. And Tim says, I'm guessing for a TG5. Rob, do you still use yours at all? Very rarely. Uh, oh, the 21.4 Pro. I'm sorry. Hey, Robin is here. Hey, Robin, how are you? The 21.4 is just not on my radar at all. Because it's a little bit bigger lens, and I just would rather use my 25 1.4 rather than a 21.4. Anyhow, very rarely do I use it now. Not because it's not a great camera, but mostly because so many cameras that need to make the rounds, right? I got a lot of use out of the TG5, and now I've gotten other cameras that I like to play with. That's all. Um, Another camera I think that I'm going to compare, and I think this could give OM Systems a problem. I don't know, it's been out for a few months now. Is that new? Who makes it? Insta360 Ace Pro 2. Emily over at Micro Four Nerds did a review of that, and it's not as compact as the TG7, but it's still a compact camera with a much larger sensor and much better video and autofocus and a lot more versatility. I mean, and it costs less. It's 399. So for those of you thinking about a TG7, maybe look at the Ace Pro 2 from, and if you get it with the little shutter button cage that Emily had in her video, uh, that's, and it has a flip screen too, right? So that's kind of a interesting option or alternative to a TG7 because you still get the weather sealing, but I don't know how underwater it goes. But it's going to be at least rainproof and uh, yeah, potentially better image quality. The major caveat to that camera is that it's a fixed focal length, and the zooming on it is all digital. Now you're starting with a 50 megapixel sensor, but the zooming is all digital. So I don't know how it's going to compare to a truly optical digital lens, optical lens that zooms from 25 to 100 millimeters versus the Ace Pro 2, which is pretty much just a fixed wide angle lens. that you can digitally zoom in camera, I think up to about 28 millimeters, but not much more than that. So that is a major sort of drawback to the Ace Pro 2 in cameras like that. Uh, and the TG7 also has tremendous macro capability. I mean, amazing macro capability and a bunch of other, features in it. But ultimately, if you're just taking pictures and want to record video, I think this Ace Pro 2 might be an interesting alternative if you don't need the zoom. But hopefully, I can get one in and see. Because Insta360 sent me an email to review that thing, and I said, okay, I'll try it. But I don't know if they'll send it or not. But it'd be interesting to compare that with my TG5 and talk about the pros and cons of each, right? Because there's no perfect camera, obviously, but it did kind of just spark my interest a little. Like if I get it, if I what does the TG7 offer over the Ace Pro 2? And where ultimately would I land if I had to choose between the two, right? I think ultimately I'd still land on a TG7 because it is definitely more pocketable and has that optical zoom range and faster lens. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to test it and see. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why the 21.4 was just didn't come to mind. But I wrote that lens off a long time ago, not because it's not a good lens. It's kind of a big lens for what it is. And my 17 1.8 is close enough to the 20 that if I want the 20 millimeter field of view, I can just crop in a little. Uh, Now, if I didn't have the 17 or the 25, I don't think I'd still consider that. I think I'd still rather have a 15 and a 25. I mean, a 20 would be right in the middle. I don't know. I like the field of view that 20 millimeter gives you, but ultimately I prefer a wider angle. So I want a wider angle or a little bit tighter. 20 is just sort of a nice in between to do it all. If you just want one prime lens, I think a 20 makes a lot of sense. But I'd rather have two primes and have one a little longer and a little shorter, or a little longer and a little versus a little wider, rather than something sort of in between. John says the 21.4 pairs nicely with the OM3. So I don't generally need fast apertures for my photography. So I think that's another reason I don't look at the 1.4. Uh, Now, if it was a 1.4 and still a pancake size, yeah, maybe I would look at it. But it's a 1.4 with a 1.4 size. And I get it. They have to stack in a lot of lenses to make sure that that lens performs at f1.4. So that just adds bulk and weight to that. So before I go any further, let's look at the bulk and weight. So I'm going to add this one and at 20. And then my 12. I love my new 12 to 45. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to. So here's the 21.4 We have the 58 millimeter filter thread, so that right there tells me it's a pretty big lens. Let me zoom in a little bit. So we have the 58 millimeter here. We have a 46 millimeter here, 46 on this one, and a 58 on this. And in terms of dimensions, this is 2.5 millimeter or 63.4 millimeters long and 67 millimeters, right? I think that's right. But yeah, it's 63 millimeters, the fatness, right? The diameter, and then the length is 61. Um, Compared to, you know, 57 over, yeah, I mean, look at the dimensions here. And then the weight, 247 grams versus my 12 to 45. So for all intents and purposes, I think the 20 millimeter lens is about the same size as my 12 to 45 f4, just a little bit shorter, about, less than a centimeter shorter. Uh, that's a lot of lens for just a single focal length. And size and weight is virtually the same. They're both around 250. So I think that was the main reason I didn't go with it. And I put a lot of emphasis on size and weight for me because that's why when my 12 to 40 f2.8 died, I replaced it with a 12 to 45 f4. Yeah, I'm losing a stop of light, but I just found over the years I just don't need that extra stop so much because I do a lot of flash photography, and if I want shallow depth of field ever, I can just get my 45 prime, my 25 prime, and get a little shallower depth of field. And if that's not enough, I'll just grab one of my full frame cameras, which is very rare. Say 80% of the time, I'm like at f5.6 or f8 um, on a micro four thirds. I just don't need shallow depth of field, and I don't need the wide aperture for light or exposure. Again, mostly because for my photography, if I need more light, I'll just use flash. And I don't mind high ISO because of DxO. So that's just where I'm at in my photography. Now, that's not to say I don't love my 25 1.4 Leica. Uh, when I want shallow depth of field, and my 45 1.8 for doing some portrait work. I like the 25 better than the 45. Just the field of view difference. I prefer being a little closer to my subjects, and I just like the field of view at 25. I just prefer wider than narrower most of the time. And so my 45 doesn't get as much use. If I'm going to do portraits, I go for my 25 typically. Um, but okay. I remember because the review unit I loaned from local distributor, I lost the original lens cap and it was impossible to replace at the time. Oh, okay. Let's see. It is sad there is not something like a Sigma 18 to 135 for Micro Four Thirds. That was one of my favorite low light wide for APS-C Pensex. They have that ultra expensive like 1.7 zooms, but that is a different dollar level. Yeah. Yeah, they have them, but they're expensive. Um, is there a shutter button cage and lens filters for newer GoPros? I don't know. I haven't looked at GoPros at all. I know they have lens filters, but I don't know about cages. And Wayne says there's the Panasonic 10 to 20. Oh yeah, yeah, that's the big heavy one. That X Meta was talking about. And Semjon says, got a bit lucky and found the Voigtlander 25.95 for 200 bucks in great condition in a local shop. Should arrive next week. Gonna see if it's decent. 0.95 and how fun the manual experience is. Yeah. So yeah, wide open, that lens is soft. Every sample that I've seen. Uh, but if you want that dreamy, soft look out of your camera, you can certainly do that with that lens. And then stopping it down, it performs like any other high performance lens. But the Voigtlanders are more about the, I guess the magical rendering they give. I mean, I can't speak to it because I don't have this lens, but a lot of people love how the lens renders the images, the out of focus areas, the color science, or the not the color science, but the colors that come through that lens. Uh, and of course, the manual experience is buttery smooth. I imagine buttery smooth, uh, focusing ring, and then the heft and weight and feel of the lens on your camera, because that's not a small lens, right? That's pretty heavy lens too. So yeah, that's a lens you buy uh, if you're talking about photography for the experience. Uh, with the images that you get from it, the rendering, and also the experience of manually focusing with a very high quality optics and build construction and stuff. A lot of videographers like that lens for its soft, sort of dreamy look that it can give wide open. But yeah, the images I've seen from it wide open, they're soft. But that you have to use that to a creative effect. But yeah, let us know next week when you get it in what you think about it. And also bidding on it, Laowa 17 1.8 on eBay. If I'm lucky, I'll get it for 50 bucks or 50 pounds if no one else bids on it. So far, I'm the only one interested in it. I'm not familiar with that lens. 17 1.8 from Laowa. I mean, 50 pounds is a good deal, though. Let me see what that is. Hmm, that's really small. It's not that expensive, brand new. Whoops. Okay. I guess it should be small. It's a 17 1.8. But, Laowa's been makes great lenses too, right? A lot of these third-party manufacturers, they're really cranking out some excellent lenses that are small, lightweight, compact, even for APS-C and full frame. Berto says it's awkward taking photos with action cameras. Yeah, but like I said, look at the Ace Pro 2. It comes with that cage with a shutter button on it. That might sort of alleviate that awkwardness because my little I haven't I have this one, this Insta 360. I think you have one too, right? This is really awkward to take photos with and videos for that matter. Uh, but and the battery life is just unbelievably bad when you have this thing detached. In when I have everything together like this, it's not bad. But yeah, I wouldn't want to use this for photos. It's just really weird. The 40 millimeter f2Z lens works great for street at night on my Z7. Yep. A lot of people like that 40 from Nikon. I didn't like it. I tried it. Because I remember when the Nikon ZF launched, I went to the camera store and tried it with a 40 millimeter f2, and that really tempered my gas for that camera setup because the camera was beautiful and all that, and the feel of it was okay, but it was I looked at the images when I got home and I was like, nah, why buy this? It's like I I got so many other great cameras and I just didn't feel the magic with the Nikon ZF. And I know a lot of people love that camera and that lens in particular, but I didn't enjoy it, you know, and I didn't see myself taking it out and using it at all. Because there's cameras that, like my very first Micro Four Thirds EM10 Mark II. I snapped a few pictures in the camera store, and I was like, "Man, this is great." I'm taking it. And uh, what else? What else did I try? Because you watch everything online, the reviews and everything, but then you go to the camera store if you can and try it before you buy it. And when I bought, what did I buy after that? I bought my EM1 Mark II, my EM1 Mark III, my OM1. The OM1, I didn't have to try it first. I knew it was going to be a great camera for me, but I tried just about every camera. And the only reason I have a Canon R8 is because when I picked that camera up and put it in my hand, it was one of the most comfortable cameras I ever felt had to hold in my hand. So I said, one day I'm going to buy this camera, and I just waited to get a good deal on. I got a decent deal, not a great deal. I got a decent deal on it, and with a few trade-ins, I didn't have to pay too much for it. But uh, going in and trying, having that luxury to be able to go to the store and try a camera before you buy it can make a big difference. And it really did with the Nikon ZF for me. That after I tried it in hand, I was like, "Eesh, maybe not." And the 40 millimeter lens just was even more so of a disappointment to me. Um, but that's just me, right? I'm in the minority on that. I think a lot more people like that lens and camera combo than I do. And the 20 millimeter f1.4 is quite small and light, in my opinion. I love it even on something like the GX85, balances really well. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I know that my 12 to 45 is the same weight, it's the same thickness, it's just a little bit longer. And I just don't see myself, I yeah, I'd rather use my 25 Leica or my 17-1.8. 20 just doesn't make sense to me. And Emmanuel says, with my M3, I carry the 12 to 45 f4, the 40 to 150 f4, and the 21.4 all in a very small bag. Yes. And that's why OMC, Micro Four Thirds is awesome, is you can carry, in your case, three pro lenses that have awesome image quality, an amazing range, right, in terms of focal length. And then the 20 millimeter gives you your low light capability if you need it. Uh, and yeah, in a small bag, no problem at all. In fact, you could probably skip the bag, just wear a fanny pack or whatever just a little belt bag, right? To have your 40 to 150 and your 20, and then walk around with your 12 to 45 on the camera, just on a strap or with a wrist strap. Either way, you can get out there very, very small, lightweight system. Like this was my setup yesterday. This is a big bag, but I carried a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a messenger bag. It's for, in terms of, just to give you some perspective, this is about a 6 liter messenger bag, right? But in this, I had all my filters. These are my infrared and ND filter set. These are my special effect filters, like my star filter, my swirly filter, uh, and my lens flare filter. 14 to 42 kit lens with my 580 nanometer infrared filter, and I had my GoPro in there. Not GoPro, my Insta360. Let me pack this in the way I had it with the visor adapter. And I put this in here like that. And I got my two filter packs that I put in here. So this is where I'm at so far, right? Down here, I have my 60 macro lens, right, in this little cup holder. And then I got two flashes here, my V480 and my IT30 Pro. I put them in the bag like this, right on top of the um, 60 macro lens. And then my OM3 with 12 to 45 and the strap I'll tuck in over here. I have a relatively thin strap. So now that's everything, right? And then I just close this and I close this and I'm all set. I got all that in here. And then there's spare battery and cables here. I also had my flash diffuser here. And then I had a flash diffuser here. And then I had my pocket tripod, tabletop tripod over here. And now I'm ready for macro and infrared photography, like I was talking about earlier. Plus any, special effects stuff that I wanted to do. And this is why I love Micro Four Thirds. Is look how much stuff I have in this bag, uh, and all the things I can do with it. Now, if I was shooting with really any other camera system, APS-C or full frame, all the lenses are going to be much larger. Like on the, uh, let's say the Canon or Sony, the 100 millimeter macro lens would be the closest thing to my 60 macro lens that I have for my eyes. The 100 millimeter. The reason I brought the 14 to 42 kit lens, because I brought the 12 to 45, so there's a ton of overlap, right? But the 12 to the 14 to 42 kit lens uh, doesn't have any hotspots in infrared, so I wanted to try it. So I was told, and it turns out to be true. The 14 to 42 kit lens is pretty amazing. The 14 to 42 easy kit lens is pretty amazing for infrared. The problem with that lens is I don't have filters that fit it too well. I had to use 3 step rings to get that one filter to fit on there. And then I'd have to use another 2 step rings to get the filters that I have for infrared to fit that. It just gets awkward. So, um, but I bought the 12 to 45 f4 uh, because it fits all of the filters, my ND filters. I have a bunch of 58 millimeter ND filters and polarizers, and then special effect filters, like I was saying, my swirly filter. And so that's why I used the 12 to 45 f4, why I brought it, in addition to the 14 to 42 kit lens. That's so small and compact, you can just put that in your shirt pocket if you want, right? But I brought it because I wanted to try the infrared on it. So this weekend was the first time I tried infrared on that. And if you had to restart your camera collection, what would be the first camera? It'd be the OM3 with a 12 to 45. Hands down. That would be my first camera. I didn't have to think about that at all, right? Um, that's where I would start. Clearly, I could do all of my professional work. Well, I'm sorry, that's a lie. I would need to get a 7 to 14 to do my pro work with the architectural stuff. But I could probably do 80% of my photography with a 12 to 45 and an OM3. And then if I wanted to expand on that, I would, my next purchase would probably be a 40 to 150 kit lens, and then I would get the 300 f4 Pro, and then I would start to back into the other primes, the 17, the 25, and I'd be pretty much done at that point. Uh, Maybe that 4 millimeter fisheye lens, then I would start to get into really wacky lenses from there. But it definitely OM3, 12 to 45 f4 Pro. Then I would get the 40 to 150 kit lens, and then I would get the 300 f4 Pro, and then I would get from there I would back into some primes, probably the 15 1.7 Leica, the 25 1.4 Leica, and then from there I would go into the more obscure lenses, fisheye lenses, things like that. That would be it, and that's all I would need, and I wouldn't need this rack behind me and this dry box, you know, and all this other stuff. If I started completely over, I could do that, and I would only be in for what's the camera? 2,000, about 2,300 for the lens and camera, and then another 200 for the 40 to 150, so I'm at 25, and then the 300 f4 is another 3, so I'm at, say, 55, and then 2 primes. I would buy those used, definitely. I would buy those used. So we're talking, probably another $400 for those 2. So about $6,000. I could do almost everything, and then if I wanted to use it for my architectural, I'd have to get the 7 to 14. Man, that stuff adds up fast, but there's no way around it. The 300 f4 Pro is expensive, and the camera and lens is, yeah, I don't know. If I wanted, that's what I would do. Okay. Yesterday, my own 5 Mark II was a real treat to use, but for the car show part, I used my Canon M50, which was also a treat. Yeah, very, very nice cameras, both of them. I had an M50 for a little while, never used it, so returned it or traded it for something else. Uh, and Wayne says, just think about buying the big white next week. We will see. Yeah, good luck, man. That's my dream lens. I'm gonna get that one day if I hit the lottery or something, or if I can get the YouTube channel to turn around a bit. Not that it was ever great, but uh, I had a good week with PhotoLab, though. Rainy day today. Good home system day to get outside in the wet. Yep. And Simjohn says, yeah, I'm interested in manual lenses lately because I got myself to OM2N and love the analog manual experience, but film is so expensive. Maybe can recreate it with my OM3. So, some great manual lenses that have a very vintage look to them are the original Pen F film camera lenses. Uh, Try those, especially the kit lens. It was the 38 millimeter f1.8. That lens is really great. It's a little tight focal length. I get it, 38 millimeters on micro four thirds, but that renders beautifully if you want a very vintage feel to it. Let's see if I can show you an image. Yeah, so here's some images that I took with the 38 millimeter. I mean, it just has that bubbly bokeh, just that very, very vintage look. And then here's another one, just a regular color shot, but it renders, it's really sharp. And this is shot wide open. And you get these beautiful flares, with it when you have the light kind of coming in at the right angle. You get this beautiful flaring from it just naturally. There's another one. So yeah, this is and they're really small. They're only this big. Like this one. Here is the this is the 25 millimeter f4. Look how small that lens is compared to my 12 to 40, right? It's just tiny. But I'll show you what it looks like on here. How beautiful is that on an OM3, you know? That you have beautiful aperture ring right up here, your focus ring back here. They have a faster 25, but it's not much bigger than this. This I just got the f4 because I paid $100 for this lens. I got a really normally this lens sells for 200. I got a really good deal on it. Uh, but now the OM3 looks like an actual film camera for whatever reason. It looks much more like a film camera now than it did with the 12 with the pro lens on it, right? 'Cause this lens has a very modern feel to it with the fine ribbing and stuff and the fonts that they use. Okay. Yeah, most bidding on eBay happens in the final 20 seconds. Yeah, it's always the last few seconds sometimes. So Wayne says, I got the ZF to adapt manual lenses on MFT crop factor. Yeah, definitely. So for me, uh, if I wanted to use a modern digital camera, yeah, the ZF makes a lot of sense. If you want to, if you buy a modern digital camera to adapt vintage lenses. And what I decided to do as an alternative, I mean, I still adapt my vintage lenses to various mirrorless cameras, but uh, yeah, what you're talking about is a problem, right? It's hard to find wide angle vintage lenses that are affordable. They get really expensive, right? Versus, you can buy 50 millimeter all day long for like 30, $40. But then when you want to buy, say, a 25 millimeter, 24 or 20 millimeter vintage, then the price quadruples, if not more. And 50 millimeter vintage lens is 100 millimeter on micro four thirds. So yeah, it's a problem. So I thought to myself, Nikon makes a lot of great vintage glass, and there's a lot of great vintage glass for the Nikon F mount. So Nikon DF, and then if I want to use a vintage lens, I just buy the original F mount lens and no adapter needed, right? I don't get the modern digital experience with the focus peaking and all of that. I have to kind of go through the EVF, but uh, that's the route I decided to go. So my Nikon, like when I want to use my Nikon 105 2.5, my Nikon 135 3.5, even my uh what- I have a few others, the Nikon 200 f4. These are all great vintage lenses, and I just adapt them natively to my Nikon DF. So I have a Nikon DF, which also tempered a lot of my want for the VF. I was like, how much am I really adding to my photography experience with the ZF versus the DF? Um, because with the ZF, I'd have to buy an adapter and adapt it, and it's just not the same experience as my my DF. Anyway, it's getting confusing saying DFZF, but I that's kind of what I lean towards. I still like to adapt my vintage Minolta glass to my Olympus cameras, but I do keep in mind that yeah, I'm going to be basically using short telephotos for everything, right? Like my Roker 50 millimeter f1.4 and my 135 f3.5 Roker, Minolta lenses. They render beautifully and really are just amazing lenses. But yeah, they're going to be telephoto or short telephoto. And Butters is here. Good morning. From Southern California. Today is one of the rare Sundays that I'm catching Chet live instead of a replay. Oh, okay. I'm glad you can make it. And years ago, I chipped my tooth on a last minute. I've never done that. Uh, and this side towards screen says, be nice if we had camera stores. The closest one is 25 minutes away, and they are so expensive, and they make you feel bad if you want to just try the camera. Yeah, that sucks. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have some great camera stores locally to me, District Camera and also Ace Photo. Ace Photo is a little bit of a hike. District Camera is, all the people there are great. They're happy to show you anything, answer questions. And Intrigue is here. Good to see you. And OM1 plus 12 to 100 f4 might be better than an OM3 and 12 to 45 f4. That's true, but I don't want to carry a 12 to 100 all the time. Again, I prioritize size and weight. So there's times, because a lot of times, like after the photo meet or photo walk, we'll go have breakfast or something. I much rather have my 12 to 40. A lot of times I put my kit lens on when we go eat lunch or go have lunch, and we get away from the photo walk and we start doing other things. I've I've been tempted by the 12 to 100 a few times, but ultimately I just look at the overall size of that and I'm like, I'm not going to carry this thing everywhere. I'd rather use, like I said, the only reason I got the 12 to 45 Pro is because of the filters, and my 12 to 40 f2.8 died. But the 14 to 42 kit lens is so close in focal range. If it were not for that tiny filter thread, I wouldn't even need a 12 to 45 f4 Pro. But because I like to use filters a lot, I I decided, I bought it used for like 350 bucks. I decided to just get it so I can use all my my fun filters. Uh, rather than trying to use step rings back and forth, because some of the filters you can't even get at 37 millimeters, right? Like star filters, infrared filters, they're really hard to find. There's certainly the swirly bokeh filter, the other filter I want to get, and a kaleidoscope filter. I mean, there's all kinds of lens filters. I know I'm probably in a minority when it comes to using filters, but I just didn't want to go through the hassle of step rings back and forth. Step ring hell. Okay, I'm in step ring hell basically. Uh, so when the filters go on sale, I tend to buy the filter in the ring size that fits the lens I would use it on. But I still step ring quite a bit. Certain filters that are expensive. Some of the infrared filters are a little expensive. Um, anyhow, yep, Rob. Thanks for the 20% off purchase. Oh, awesome! I'm glad you could use that. You can still get 15% off. I have the coupon code down below in the video of this, but the 20% is gone, but 15 is still good. Owen should bring back the modern Pen F film camera as a niche, like Pentax did. Might drive some hype. It would drive some hype, but they'd probably lose money on that. It would be cool to see that, though. They're just not in a position to do that. They need to be very, very selective with what they release. I mean, I really love the OM3, and for me, it was the perfect new release uh, that they could do because I wasn't sold on the OM1 Mark II because I have the OM1 Mark One, so I wasn't completely sold in upgrading to that. But when the OM3 came out, yeah, I would have liked the Pen F maybe a little better, a Pen F2, but I think the OM3 was nearly as perfect a release for me as they could have made. Uh, but yeah, they have to be very selective. Their next camera, I really hope they come out with like an OM20 under 500 because an OM10, that's going to be priced at 700-800 bucks and add a lens onto it. Now we're talking, for a little more, you can get an OM5, which is going to be a much better camera. And if they try to make the OM10 basically an OM5 without weather sealing, the price gap's going to be like this. Who's going to buy an OM10 that's so close to an OM5? Why not just get the OM5? Or you can look at it the other way. People are going to be like, I can save a couple $100, maybe 300, and get an OM10. I don't need weather sealing. I can get an OM10 and not an OM5. Excuse me. But if you came out with an OM20 that would say 499, throw a kit lens in for 599, how the camera's going to perform, when I'm tutoring students with their Sony cameras. And I have a couple that shoot Canon, and it's really handy if I know how to set things up very quickly. So I kind of keep them around from a like a separate source of income type situation where I can use my Sony and my Canon to tutor. The Fujifilm is a whole different thing, though. I've never tutored anybody that's shot with Fuji. And I've been shooting Fuji a long time, but I just I just wanted to get back into the Fuji system. And then ultimately the same thing happened is oh, this is not it. Anyway, the Fuji's up here somewhere. I bought it with like lots of good intentions, and I thought I was gonna really enjoy the film simulations and the user experience. And push come to shove, I'm like, I can't fit as many lenses in my bag with the Fuji as I can with my OM3. Uh, but I still really like the images I got out of my Fuji camera. So that's a tough question, Lynn. I don't have any explanation why I keep cameras I don't need. Yeah, I'm sure you don't need it, but love to play with it. Yeah, there's a lot of that too. Like my Fuji camera. Now, the camera I can tell you that I bought that I don't need but love is my Pentax monochrome. Nobody needs a monochrome camera. I just love it. But like, look at this Fuji camera. This setup here is very, very similar to a Micro Four Thirds with a 40 to 150 kit lens. This has the 55 to 200, which is a great lens. But man, this thing is really bulky. Uh, but I love this top plate LCD. I love that. I got to take this camera out and shoot with it. The focus bracketing sucks in it. It's kind of nice that you can set the front and back, like the range of stacking you want to do, but then man, it just takes like a thousand, I mean, not a thousand, I'm exaggerating, but it takes so many pictures that you have to go back and stack manually. The workflow is just horrendous. Wasn't there a rumor that OM might bring back a digital version of the Trip 35? I heard that somewhere. Um, I heard that. That could be interesting, right? I don't know how it would do, but it'd be interesting. The Nikon DF is also something I thought about, but they're still expensive here. Dream would be the Epson RD1. Yeah, the Epson RD1 is cool. It's just getting so old, I would worry about it working anymore. Yes, the DF is a unique experience. I get to use all my old glass from the days gone by. Yep. And Linda said, now I'm lusting after a 25 1.4 again. You can get the version one for like 200 bucks. You know, it's such a beautiful lens, the rendering. I like it anyway. I like it a lot. And Pat says, I'm looking for a recommendation on replacing my BLH1 for the EM1. So that's the battery. I've always used Ollie batteries and charger. OM does not have in stock. Ooh, well, if you are, I assume you already have the charger, right? So you just need. A lot of people like the Wasabi. A lot of people like that one. They cost a little bit more. If you can find one by Green, let me just do a quick search. Uh, I've heard good things about this brand, Green. So I'll give you this is not an affiliate link or anything, but I'll put this link in the chat. Oh, you're not seeing my screen. This one here. Um, I've heard good things about this. It's on sale now for 20 bucks. So that's good. And then let's see. Otherwise, if you want to buy, let's see, BLH-1. See if they're in stock over at B&H. I don't know if you're in the USA or not, but those are 70 bucks. They're expensive. But so I would try the green that I saw from Adorama. Did I give you the link or not? So there's the one for the green. That's just the link so you can go check it out. And then B&H, hmm, here is the B&H. This is an affiliate link. So if you buy it from B&H, I'll make like 2%. But anyhow, that's green I've heard is very good. The wasabis and all the other third party stuff are all the same to me. They're not gonna last as long and they're going to uh swell up over time. So the way I like to buy third party batteries is I'll buy it with a charger because chargers are pretty reliable regardless of, third party or not. So I'll buy a charger and I'll get a couple extra batteries for like $10 more, something like that, right? And then what I do is I keep the chargers in my car because they're all USB chargers. So I can charge batteries on the go. And Simjan says, good experience with Pantone batteries on Amazon Germany. Had them for my own 5 and on 3 and GX85. Okay. Any recommendations on variable ND filters? So, yes, I'm going to give you a generic recommendation. Make sure you get a true color variable ND. True color. Okay, that's very important. Uh, Make sure that it's really only up to 5 stops. So you want to get one that's ND 2 to 64 or basically a 5-stop variable ND. If you do more than that, typically you start to get vignetting and stuff, especially with wide angle lenses. So the better ND filters are going to be true color and only go up 5 stops in variability. There's also ND filters now that have the um, polarizer separate, right? So you can control the polarization separate to the ND light reduction effect. Those are kind of expensive, but that's probably the most versatile in a single setup, right? And then it depends on what you want to use it for. If you want to use the ND filter just to slow down your shutter speed a little bit, maybe in combination with the computational ND filters that we have in OM system cameras, 1 to 5 stops is good enough. 1 to 5 stops is also excellent for flash photography, doing portrait work and stuff like that. 1 to 5 stops is also excellent for video, right? If you want to bring your shutter speed and get within the shutter angle. So 1 to 5 stop variable ND filter that's true color is the best way to go for probably, everything. Now, if you need something stronger, right, you want it darker than 5 stops, then I would recommend solid ND filters at that point and just buy a 10 stop or like an ND 1000. I would just start buying solid ND filters if you need something darker, because the color cast and everything that can happen with variable NDs is a little bit of an issue. Even with the true color ones, there's still a little bit of color cast. There's just no way around it optically because of the way light has to bend around all the polarization that's done in variable ND filters. And depending on how the coatings they use and the width of their polarization, it's so complicated. I'm not a lens engineer by any means, but uh, you want to make sure you get true color because if you get the ones that are just not true color, then you're going to get you have to color correct everything in post processing. So you have to be very conscientious about in the field using a gray card if possible to color calibrate before you get back in post processing. Makes things a lot easier. So that's what I would do. I have some decent selections. Let me just see uh what's my deal page. I usually have some good deals on filters. This is the 37 millimeter. This is a really good deal. I don't know what filter size you need, but this is a good deal. So when um I bought my 12 to 45 f4 Pro, so I bought this 58 millimeter filter ring set because that's what fits, and it's on sale for $8.49. And you get this is a solid ND filter, but it's an ND8 and an ND64, and I just use these in combination with the in-camera ND filter, and I'm fine. Uh, and then it also has a circular polarizer, so that kind of lives on my lens. But I didn't find it. I'll find some by Tuesday, but variable ND true color. So if you type that in, let's see what they have. K&F makes great filters. Yeah, ND2 to 30. So this is a good example, right? This is a little bit big. You want the 58 is on it. There's a 58 here for $29. But this is what I'm looking for. True color, hard stop. That's also a nice feature. 5 stops, yeah, ND1. Limited neutral density. Okay, so multi-coated, all yada yada. So this is a good option, right, for variable ND. This has everything I'm looking for in a variable ND filter, and is pretty affordable. Tim just says, my converted friend to M43. I gave him my GX85 with 15 1.7 and 45 1.8. He wanted to sell all his Nikon DSLRs and lenses to get that Leica M9 or Q2, which is stupid decision. I guess I don't know where he is in his photography. You know, I mean the GX85 with the 15 and 45, that's a nice setup. But and when I say where he is in his photography, sometimes you just want a luxury camera, you know? Like I would love to have an M9 or M11 with a nice APO lens from Leica, but that would be a pure luxury, right? Uh, but if you want to talk about a very pragmatic type of photographer, GX85 is certainly as good as a Q, Leica, for all intents and purposes. If you're just going to go out and point and shoot stuff, but I would only consider where I'm at in my photography. Leicas would be purely a luxury purchase, like my Leica, even my Leica Deluxe 8. That was purely a luxury thing. I didn't need a Leica Deluxe 8, but I've always wanted a Leica, and that's probably the closest, the only one that I could afford. Um, Even though optically and for all intents and purposes, the images are identical to my LX100 Mark II. I cannot see any difference between the two. And the performance is virtually identical as well too in terms of autofocus and all of that. But I bought that Leica Deluxe 8 because I just wanted it, and that's the only reason I would buy a Leica. So I think your advice is fair to your friend there. And John says, I carry the ND64 and use Live ND with my own 3 on sunny days. Yeah, so combining the two is really a nice option, right? And you need a 67 millimeter. Okay, so let me see. I mean, the one I just showed you, it's not a particularly good price, but it's fair. They have the 67 millimeter for $32. So I'll give you a link to that. This again is my affiliate link. And that's a fair price, $31 to get a true color variable ND, 5 stop. There's always going to be a better deal eventually, though, because what I found is filters, the sale prices kind of rotate by ring size. So this week the 58's on sale, but next week the 67 will be on sale for a much lower price, right? But at $32, if you need one, you don't need to wait. Not for $32, just get it. Um, because there's things that I can wait for, and other things I can wait. I can wait until it goes on sale. He's purely a hobbyist like me. I love the M9, but it's also old now. I think it's great when you own some newer